On May 2nd, 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan were reported missing from the family's home in Lansdowne Station, Pictou County. What began as a frantic local search quickly widened into a months-long, multi-agency investigation. Helicopters swept the tree line, K-9 teams combed thick brush, drones scoured ponds and roads, and volunteers turned out in shifts to cover more ground than most neighborhoods ever see. The RCMP gathered thousands of leads, collected video from homes and businesses across the region, and ran down tip after tip. Even with that scale of effort, the obvious things, a clear sign, a witness, a trail leading out of the county, never materialized. That vacuum of evidence has left room for theories, pain, and a public that simply refuses to let the story die. They vanished from a quiet yard one ordinary morning, and 3 months later the questions still pile up like winter snow. Where did Lily and Jack go, and who knows the answer? If you follow this case, hit subscribe and turn on the bell now so you don't miss any new details as they come in. This isn't a show, it's the desperate, ongoing search for 2 little kids and the truth behind their disappearance. One clue forced investigators to refocus their search, a possible bootprint found on a pipeline trail near the family's property. The boot impression became an anchor point, the sort of lead that can take an investigation from wide, unfocused searching to a place where evidence can actually be tested. RCMP teams moved to grid search areas around Gearlock Road and the nearby pipeline trail, targeting places where that print suggested someone may have passed. Ground teams, supported by aircraft and K-9 units, methodically covered ditch lines, culverts, and thick stands of trees. The thinking was straightforward and urgent. If that print belonged to one of the missing children, or was made by someone who had contact with them, it could reveal a route, a direction, or even a place to dig for more evidence. At the same time, investigators cautioned that a single print is only one piece of a very large puzzle. It needs context, corroboration, and forensic work before it can be tied to any person or timeline. To understand why that footprint mattered, you have to picture the setting. Lansdowne Station is rural, with narrow lanes and deep woods that can hide 100 secrets. When the search first started, emergency crews mapped out a 5.5 square kilometer area of dense forest for systematic sweeping. Volunteers and professionals worked side by side. Local hunters with tracking experience, SAR teams with long legs and patience, drone pilots hovering over the tree canopy, and forensic technicians collecting anything that looked out of place. The scale was enormous because, in the early hours after a disappearance, every minute can matter. Yet even with those numbers, the search turned up only a few items linked to the children. A pink blanket that the family identified as Lily's and an isolated boot impression that attracted investigators' attention. Neither found object, on its own, answered the central question. It only deepened it. There are 2 kinds of missing child cases. Those where a trail leads somewhere and those where the trail goes cold. This one has bled into both realities. On one hand, the RCMP collected an enormous volume of information, well over 5,000 video files from doorbell cameras, dashboard cams, and private surveillance, hundreds of public tips, bank and phone records, and witness statements from neighbors and travelers in the area. On the other hand, after exhaustive ground searches and forensic tests, officials said they did not have the kind of evidence that allows them to confirm a criminal act, at least as of mid-July in the public documents. That distinction matters because it shapes both investigative options and public perception. The pictures released and the items seized, the blanket pieces, the boot impression, toothbrushes, are personal and suggest proximity, but none of them, in isolation, is a smoking gun. Investigators have been blunt about that in court filings and public statements. Families in these tragedies live with a different kind of clock. Investigators have tools, forensics, polygraphs, surveillance requests, but time works against evidence outdoors. Rain erases prints, animals shift clothing, wind moves paper, and human memory blurs. That's why the discovery of the blanket and boot print triggered specific scientific steps. Soil samples, impression casting, careful chain of custody procedures, and forensic testing for fibers, DNA, and other traces that might survive weather or movement. Lab work takes time, and the courts must sign off on certain warrants and searches before data can be collected from phones or private accounts. Meanwhile, the family waits in a loop of hope and dread, clinging to the idea that a small piece of evidence, a matching fiber, a verified camera frame, could put the search on a new course. Public involvement has been both a lifeline and a hazard. Local people and volunteers have provided manpower, watched over search perimeters, and kept the story alive online and in prayer. That attention helped push the provincial government to offer a reward and kept national law enforcement resources focused on the case. But the same attention brought speculation, rumors, and harassment. The internet is a fast amplifier for every theory. The RCMP has had to balance public engagement with protecting the integrity of the investigation, warning that misinformation can send officers chasing false trails and can unintentionally hurt the family. The court files themselves were heavily redacted when they were released. Investigators said the redactions were necessary to avoid compromising leads and to protect privacy. That lack of transparency, while sometimes necessary, only fuels frustration and fuels the online sleuths who try to fill in the blanks. Police techniques changed as the case evolved. In addition to old-fashioned searches, digital forensics became central. Investigators sought judicial authorizations to seize phone records, GPS data, and bank transactions for the period around the disappearance. These requests are routine in complex cases. Call logs and location data can place people at a specific intersection at a moment in time, or show a vehicle leaving the county. The RCMP also canvassed nearby businesses and highway camera footage to see whether any cars, including the tan or gold sedan mentioned in one witness statement, might have left the area during the window when the children vanished. Each new surveillance clip or data request is another layer to analyze, but piecing those layers into a coherent timeline is painstaking work. That's why the investigators have emphasized a careful, deliberate approach. Check every lead, rule out possibilities, then move on. The public, hungry for answers, often wishes the work could be faster. Investigation, however, is a methodical art. Two details from the public files keep coming back in conversations: the pink blanket and the bootprint. Family members say the pink blanket belonged to Lily. One piece was found in a tree near the home, another piece in a trash bag at the driveway's end. Whether the blanket ended up in those spots by accident, by a child's play, or by someone trying to stage a scene is a question investigators must answer. The bootprint, analyzed by forensics, was tentatively matched to a child's size, consistent with an impression casting done on the pipeline trail, but matching size alone is not identification. Footwear impressions can be compelling circumstantial evidence, especially when combined with other indicators, but they require more corroboration. That's why the RCMP has kept pushing for more footage, more tips, and more tests. Each small result narrows the field of possibilities. Each inconclusive result leaves the field wide open. The human side of this case cannot be overstated. Vigils popped up, candles burned, and neighborhoods organized search teams. The children's relatives, often exhausted and raw, pleaded for the public to come forward with anything: a scrap of information, a memory, even a passing observation. Those close to the family have had to contend with strangers' opinions and, in some cases, vicious online attacks. The emotional toll is obvious. Parents and grandparents who were once private people are now watched and second-guessed. Grief, suspicion, and compassion swirl together until it becomes hard to know who is a helpful witness and who is a rumor-monger. For many in the area, the only real thing that would change everything is one clear, verifiable lead that points to the children. Until then, the community lives with a steady ache. What lessons come from this kind of investigation? First, that early action matters. Thorough, timely searches and careful evidence collection can make or break a case. Second, that digital footprints are increasingly crucial. Cameras, phones, GPS data, and electronic records can tell a timeline that human memory cannot. Third, that even in the age of instant information, caution is a virtue. Unverified claims do tangible harm. Finally, communities have a role to play beyond speculation. Organizing legitimate searches, sharing verified information with police, and protecting the privacy and dignity of grieving families all help the effort. The RCMP has acknowledged these points. Now the public must choose how it will contribute, with tips and care, or with wild theories and harmful accusations. There remains a core, acute truth in this long story. The case is far from over. New evidence can change everything. A verified camera clip, a DNA match, a location that yields physical proof. Investigators keep reminding the public that even small, late tips can matter. That's not platitude, it's reality. Cold trails sometimes grow warm again because someone recalls a detail they neglected to share, or a piece of footage surfaces that had been overlooked. For those following the case, patience is excruciating, but vigilance matters. If you have information, even if it seems trivial, pass it to law enforcement via the official tip lines. The probe is still active, resources are still committed, and every new piece of information is processed. The ultimate goal, getting Lily and Jack home, remains the only compass everyone involved claims to use. In the end, this story is about two children who should be in classrooms and playgrounds, not the center of an investigation. It's about neighbors who become detectives overnight, and officers who sift through hundreds of leads while balancing procedure and urgency. It's about the strain between the need for transparency and the need to protect an active inquiry. And it's about a single, stubborn hope that small clues will add up into an answer. Whatever theories swirl online, whatever rumors circulate in comment threads, the only path to closure is verified information, responsible handling of evidence, and sustained public support for lawful investigation. If you want to help, do two things. Share verified, useful information with the RCMP through the official channels, and subscribe here to follow responsible coverage as it develops. Keep the pressure on in a way that helps investigators by keeping the case public and by amplifying official appeals for tips, not by amplifying guesses. The children's names are Lily and Jack. They deserve better than silence and suspicion. They deserve answers. We'll keep watching and reporting, and we'll keep asking anyone who knows something to step forward. The search continues, and every small piece of truth matters. If you have relevant information, contact the Northeast Nova RCMP Major Crime Unit or the provincial tip line listed in public releases. Every call is important, and that single detail you dismiss as small may be the one that changes everything.